Welcome to Beside Ourselves, a podcast on AI adoption for business by the Beside Partners.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Beside Ourselves, an AI-focused podcast for SMEs. Joining me is I'm Giles, CTO based in Cambridge in the UK, and joining me as always, my partner in crime, Theo. How are you, Theo?
I'm very well, very well. I'm in Germany, where we're also roasting like you guys are, but
I was going to
what
say,
better weather to talk about AI and things heating up than when it is 38 degrees out there,
I was going to say, if anybody's watching and they can see my hair wafting, it's only because I've got about 6 fans here out of shot that just blasting me. Yes, we are recording this in the middle of the European heat wave, which I'm assuming, well, depending on when you're listening to this, may be going or may not, maybe a vast distant memory, I don't know. But yes, it's a day like today. I wish I was in an air-conditioned office.
Fantastic. We have got a guest today.
We have got a guest.
Really,
we have indeed got a guest.
Mark.
Yeah, so Mark Johnston's going to join us shortly. He's somebody I've known for about 6 months or so, and he's based in Cambridge like myself. Really interesting background. So through various different sectors and organisations, but then coming through the university, doing a lot of interesting stuff in the AI space, and then co-founding a startup as well, which he's recently exited, which is doing some stuff in the regulated space. So I'll let Mark talk about all that. The reason why I thought he'd be really good is because actually the two of us were on a kind of, not a panel, it was like a kind of group sort of discussion session about AI, and we both did a couple of short presentations there. I was talking about the stuff that we all talk about here in terms of understanding the underlying problem, all that sort of stuff, and Mark came from sharing some of his experience in the kind of projects he learns or he's been doing, and actually what SMEs can bring to that. So I thought he's a great guy, and I thought he'd be a great person to have on. So
let's have 3 experienced nerds on the call. Let's geek out.
We can all nerd out. Right. Well, yeah, shall we get Mark in, shall we?
Let's do that.
Okay. Well, hi, Mark. Thanks ever so much for joining us. It's great to have you with us.
Hi, Giles.
Brilliant.
Theo, nice to meet you.
Excellent. Well, we've obviously given a little bit of intro to you, but I thought it's probably only fair for you to allow you to speak for yourself. And we've obviously known each other 6 months or so through various things. But yeah, maybe do you want to just give us a little bit of background on yourself, your history, your involvement with AI, all that kind of stuff? Yeah, maybe let's start from there.
Okay. I'll quickly run through the career synopsis. So I cut my teeth establishing a couple of startups in the early 90s, focused around the deregulation of telecommunication markets across Europe. So I spent my kind of formative years traveling across Europe, effectively building telecommunication networks. So that was kind of sort of my job, sort of early mid-90s. I then moved to the US to really explore the explosion of the dot-com boom that was happening at the emergence of kind of the internet and the web. Sort of late 90s, early 2000s. So I went through the boom and bust, living in the US through that, and really getting to grips with understanding disruption of emerging technologies, which I think we're seeing with AI right now, aren't we? And everyone's going, where is this going to go? What does it mean for the future? And you can look back and realize that you can't predict the future, right? You can try and be agile and manage it, but you just can't predict it. No one's going to, and that's one of the challenges, isn't it? It's moving so fast, and you're like, how do you stay in it and use it and leverage it? But predicting the future is quite a challenge. So that was, and then I moved back to the UK. I took advantage of some time to go do, an MBA in Edinburgh. I then started working, interestingly, for an agency for the European Commission based in Cambridge. That brought me to Cambridge, where I am now. And there I worked overseeing a research initiative that the European Commission funded that connected all of Europe's major research universities together and provided tools and capabilities and support for researchers globally. And kind of connected sort of Europe's research fabric with the rest of the world to try and maintain Europe's sort of research leadership, particularly around high energy physics, with CERN. And that really got me into connectivity with university, and particularly with research and the potential to kind of commercialize research. From there, I moved to actually working for the University of Cambridge. There I oversaw over 550 people focused on developing and operating educational services that were delivered through the university to schools and universities globally in about 156 countries. There, I oversaw a machine learning research center where we were really understanding how we could develop machine learning capabilities to embed them into educational services. And so you're looking for how can you augment teachers in a classroom? How can you help kids understand how they are learning and progressing, particularly around automated assessments? That really got me into kind of sort of the field of AI. That led me then to co-found a regulatory compliance company that had fundamentally AI at its core, that was producing effectively AI optimized data and AI technology capabilities to support firms effectively comply to regulation much easier and better, and that kind of thing. And I've exited that, and now I'm looking for my next opportunity.
Next opportunity. Well, we did. I mean, I think we're all of a similar era, so I think immediately. I'm not sure what the demographic is of our podcast, but there might be some people listening who are thinking, listen to those three old duffers talking about having jobs in the 90s. But yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Everybody in the 90s. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
Stuck with the internet, but no telecoms. No, you got one up on me. Yeah,
I was going to say, we've been through the internet thing. Now we've got the AI thing, and then we're old hands.
Yeah.
Very good.
So I think it's just fair to say that based upon our conversations, the kind of work, particularly in the business you've just exited, the work you were doing there was obviously you were doing a lot of custom sort of model development. You weren't like just leveraging OpenAI and all the kind of classic LLMs people are talking about. This is building very specific AI technology to solve a particular problem in a regulated space, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. And that, and that is I guess, what's interesting about AI is there's many different layers to it. And it's, and I think for SMEs, for people who are kind of non-technology based people, there's so much you can do to leverage AI without getting into that level of sophistication. And I think, one of the things that we learned through that process was that you can leverage the capability of large language models because they are so computationally powerful. But actually, if you want a task done consistently where you can quality assure it, like actually developing a domain specific model using kind of an off the shelf small language model that you can go and get from Hugging Face, AI repository for models. You can get an open source one, and then you can train that yourself with your own proprietary data. And then you get the required behaviors and outcomes that you want. And that actually is much more effective. You get higher quality. You can provide it with guardrails. You can quality assure it. And because it's smaller, it's faster and cheaper to operate and much cheaper to train as well.
Yeah. And I guess you take all the kind of the challenge of the large language models is they're large and therefore they know so much, or they think they know so much. That's where all your things like hallucinations and all that stuff coming in. But by focusing in, you, as you say, you're introducing those guardrails into the mix. Yeah.
Yeah. And I, we use this analogy a lot where, you ask an LLM a question. It's like walking into a football stadium and asking the crowd a question, right? You're going to get some, there's going to be some people, right? There's going to be some people in that audience with the relevant expertise who will give you an answer. And then there's going to be an awful lot of people that will give you a general answer. And so it generalizes. And that's why they're called kind of general models, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, what we were doing is effectively building a model where you could walk into a room and there would be 15 lawyers and you'd get a legal opinion, And that's the difference, I think, putting that kind of analogy between building something quite specific using a small language model versus using a generalized model.
And what are the, that sounds brilliant, first of all, and the football analogy, the football stadium analogy is fantastic. But does that pose any technical barriers, any kind of budgetary barriers, especially in the context of SMEs? are we going into a world where, well, it is harder to implement, it's more expensive, or is it just a big misunderstanding? Maybe just people just, should just read up on it and or enter a room actually with people that know what they're doing rather than a football stadium of people that maybe know what they're doing.
No, I think Theo, let's be really clear. I think training your own model, is a very complex technical task. And I think the first thing, and I think we ought to probably define that to decide whether you need to train a model, you also need to understand what you're trying to achieve, right? Because you can train a model based on you requiring certain outcomes. Like for example, if you're just trying to retrieve information, you don't need to train a model to do that. Like you can implement kind of a RAG technology stack on top of and put a wrapper around an LLM. You can do that, right? But if you actually want a defined outcome, and you're trying to kind of build kind of an intelligence capability, then you will need to train data. But to do that, the first thing you have to have is you have to have the data, right? And you have to have a lot of data, and that data has to be designed around the outcome you want to achieve. And I think the other thing that you've got to think about that I think people perhaps don't understand is there is the activity around, training a model. There's the machine learning data science activity. And that model's got to sit somewhere. It's got to be deployed and operated. So then suddenly you have to have, you have to have compute, you have to have storage. That has to go round, that has to sit in some kind of pipeline because you've got to feed it data and then you've got to understand what to do with the outcome. And so you're building interfaces and software around it. So you need software engineering. It's got to, you need infrastructure to operate all of that. You're going to then need tools to monitor all of that. So then suddenly you're looking at, data science, machine learning expertise, software engineering expertise, infrastructure expertise. There's an awful lot. And so if you're perhaps a non-technology based SME, you're not going to have that expertise, right? And so
that's what we're finding now, yeah.
And that's what, and so people need to understand there's the difference between leveraging AI based on what's out there in the market versus trying to build your own. I think building your own, if you're a non-technically based SME, is going to be really hard.
Yes.
We are finding, as we're speaking to SMEs, to companies about AI adoption, though, and different companies are at different stages of that path or that journey. It would be a lot harder to convince a company to go into the route that you just described, powerful as it is, if they don't have a clear understanding of the benefits that they're going to achieve at the end of this process. It's one thing to just say, well, there are some ready-made tools out there, so you can go and take one of the LLMs, use one of their prescribed ways to customize it, perhaps within your business context. It's a completely different thing to go through the process of that you just described, of training, developing, operationalizing all these things. How do what would be the general advice of kind of, when we're talking to an SME, to just say, well, at this point, you can experiment with an LLM and with the general tools until that point. But until when you cross that line, you have to go custom. You actually have to go and build your own. How do we convince them that is the right way to do it at that point?
Yeah, and I would look at that. I think in this way, I would say if an SME has defensible data that is proprietary and unique to that business, right? And they are looking for something to create proprietary behavior that they can generate from that data that gives them a defensible kind of strategic asset, because the data is unique, and therefore they can use, the power of language models to create proprietary behavior that gives them a competitive advantage, effectively based on, training the data based on patterns in the data, preferences, annotation around, decision-making or whatever the parameters are in the data that makes that then give them kind of a proprietary outcome that none of their competitors could replicate, then I would say that is the basis on which to go train your model
That
and
makes a
build a
lot
model.
of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If
and
you
we-
don't have that defensible data asset at the start and the ability to create uniqueness from that data, then I think that's going to be tricky and probably not worth it.
Yeah, and
And
I think we've seen that in some of our clients. Exactly that is that there is a there are in most cases then the off the shelf tools, the cloud based services, the LLMs will address all the issues, but there will be a niche where there is data that is, you know, IP. It's basically the whole thing the company exists for. So there is both a reluctance to feed that out into the world because of the risk that would happen, but also, as you said, actually thinking, could we take this data ourselves and generate more value from it that actually gives us a competitive advantage over our competitors, and as a result potentially increases the value of our business by doing that as well. And the other example I've seen recently with other clients is around things like data sovereignty. So where they may be working for those kind of clients, and those kind of clients are saying, this data that we're giving you to run some work on for us is also IP, and therefore we want to have complete. Well, you need to satisfy us that you're not just going to just upload this into ChatGPT and it's going to go steaming off to the US and blah 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 blah. So yeah, data sovereignty is one that's come up recently as well, of being a massive thing.
Yeah, I think that is a, I think if you think about perhaps, if you look at it, I see particularly large enterprises now really starting to separate kind of business logic, orchestration, and then model, and creating discrete domains around those things. And so, for example, you're making sure, therefore, that kind of the model can be replaced, right? So you're creating that ability to, just like you did with cloud infrastructure, the ability to change that out. And so if there's a better model, if there's a cheaper one, you can switch that out. Then you've got all of that orchestration layer where you've got your prompt management, your workflows, and all the tools that are driving what the model does and what it pulls on to make decisions. But the proprietary stuff, which is all your business logic, which really is also where your data is going to sit, right? Because that is driving a lot of your business logic. Where you've got rules, expertise, processes, decisions, all of that. A lot of that is probably hidden in data or captured in data, probably a better word. And so you're separating those things, and then you're like, well, how do I make sure that those things are separate? And I think, and this is where I go back to my distinction between kind of proprietary outcome and perhaps just knowledge retrieval. And I think if you're doing knowledge retrieval, you don't need to train a model, just build a RAG, right? And then the model can pull on the data as it's needed based on what information and knowledge you're trying to retrieve. Whereas if you're trying to generate a proprietary outcome because you've got some proprietary knowledge, then that's quite different, I think.
Of
I
course.
think to your point, if you've got that data, you don't want to train an LLM with that data, do you?
No.
Right? You want to keep that
Absolutely.
private,
Yeah. Now, the three of us, probably coming from a technical perspective, we sit and we can discuss for hours about, the idea that, well, an AI is a train that runs on data rails. We know that a lot of the conversation actually is going to be about where the data sits, what the data is, proprietary, how do you store it, how do you use it. But there is a narrative that is that has emerged over maybe the last year or so that really seems to shift the discussion around the build versus buy conversation when it comes to software and SMEs. All the talk about vibe coding and Claude Code and the rest of it, it has led a lot of people to think actually what's happening is that I don't need to buy a lot of things. I can actually just, go over to Lovable and just, type away, prompt away everything that we just discussed, right? So the narrative around the balance between the build and buy is changing, but we know better, right? We know that balance perhaps is not quite as clearly redefined as that.
Yeah, no, Theo, I think I would absolutely agree. And I think, if you think about historically, SMEs didn't build software because, it was expensive, high risk potential. Software development projects are risky things in themselves. SMEs don't have scale. Developers used to be scarce. There was ongoing development maintenance costs. So, time to market and readiness was always kind of, more controllable if you're buying than perhaps building. And I think I would argue that with AI, what it's done is it hasn't removed the buy versus build. To your point, it's moved the boundary. But I still think if you think about any major software project or, what is contained in a software project, no one really ever buys just software, are they? They're buying a business outcome, really.
Yes.
And that business outcome is wrapped in reliability, support, security, compliance, maintenance, continuous improvement. It's not just the software. They're never really buying the software. They're not actually buying the thing written in Python or whatever code it is. It's the outcome that they're actually really buying. What do they want that piece of software to achieve for their business?
Yes.
And I think that, again, needs to be factored into any decision for an SME to think that they can then use AI to build something, right? Because what I think they've got to really consider in that decision is, yes, you are effectively perhaps replacing limited cost around getting a tool to create the code, but then that code's got to run somewhere. And if you've done that in kind of a low code, no code environment, fundamentally you've got vendor lock-in because that's got to run within that ecosystem. And then suddenly you're tied to the cost of that vendor. And if you don't understand those costs and how those costs scale, then all you've really done is replaced your software cost with a token cost or a compute cost or an AI, whatever that cost is.
Which is what we're finding a lot, huh? Yes.
Yeah. And that is a variable cost where your software cost is probably a fixed cost.
Well,
and if you don't understand the scale of that, then I think SMEs could get into a real big problem.
Yeah, and we touched a bit on this last week because it was when I was at the AI Summit, it came up, this, and a lot of those costs are heavily subsidized at the moment. You look at, your Anthropics, your OpenAIs and everything, they are running an enormous loss, and everybody talks about token anxiety and how much they're spending on tokens. Well, actually, you're still buying those tokens at a discounted rate. At some point, those discounts will be removed because those companies, investors, are going to want to make money. So even if you're looking at the costs at the moment going, well, that's quite reasonable, you need to bear in mind that actually those costs could go up. Because they
will go up, right?
And they will go up because the amount they're investing trillions of dollars in hardware and stuff like that to underpin it, somebody's got to pay for that money. I mean, there's obviously a secondary debate. These companies are buying from each other, so it's kind of debt that's just flowing around. But yeah, you're right. I think it isn't just kind of as, I've got a lovable subscription and that's my cost. You say you're locking yourself into that platform, and if you're building a business critical function, then you've got to kind of accept the long run on that. Yeah,
because I think, if you think how hard it is for a business to switch software vendors, that's, and that it's going to be much harder to then switch, some proprietary platform that you built an entire solution in that, and then you've got all sorts of, you've got to rebuild it somewhere else. That's number one. So you've got the rebuilding costs, and then you've got to get the data out. You've got to so actually it becomes a much more complex problem than switching software vendors. So actually, and I think this is why we're at a real interesting time. And it so reminds me of kind of the dot-com boom is that, there's a lot of hype around it right now, right? And there's obviously an explosion of businesses offering AI solutions. And again, it's all about being smart around picking the right one, picking where to use it, where not to use it. And it doesn't mean that all the traditional things suddenly just go away. They're still there and they're still highly valuable. And I think any business now should be treating AI as just another tool in their toolkit. And it's then, how do I use it? How do I deploy it? How do I leverage this new tool that I have? And I think perhaps I'm still really interested to see if the value is in the software. I can understand it if there's an SME managing loads of stuff through spreadsheets and proprietary data all fragmented, and they want to put a kind of an AI wrapper around all of that. And they can do that quite simply, just to pull everything together to generate reports and join data, three bits of data together, because trying to do that in a spreadsheet just is impossible. And they don't have database skills or software engineering skills or data science skills to do that. And then they can connect all of this through some coding agent. Fantastic. That makes a lot of sense, where you're adding intelligence over the top. And I think using AI to add intelligence to traditional software solutions actually is not a bad thing either, right? So you've got your CRM or whatever it is, and then you're building an AI agent to extract intelligence from it.
Yeah.
In a way that you want, that's useful for your bit. I think those things SMEs should be really looking into.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned hype earlier, and the hype, at least on the VC industry, the whole startup community and everything, has been about let go, or the whole SaaS apocalypse thing, let go of the software that you already had and start transitioning onto the AI native software. And I think that as the hype is beginning to subside a little bit, perhaps, is exactly what you just said, that you can have your existing software, you can have your existing stack, ecosystem, architecture, and then add intelligence on top of it. Probably give you the best of both worlds. You don't need to kind of go with this untested new AI native in quote solutions when you can just add intelligence at the top as an external layer. That does make a lot of sense.
Well, and also go and look outside of the systems altogether, because again, as we've said before, and we've found in a number of the projects we're doing for clients, that actually in some instances it's people and process. And as you said, Mark, the data as well, actually there's a whole project there in its own right in terms of actually doing a data cleanse, getting everything sorted. You can't just go and, and it's the same thing that's existed throughout time, for our entire careers. If you take an IT system and you put rubbish into it, you will get rubbish out of it. Whether it doesn't matter how much AI is involved. If you give AI rubbish data, as you say, it would generally then come up with a rubbish answer. So it's coming at it to the point of saying, what are you fundamentally trying to achieve? And where are the blockers in you doing that? And that might be a technology issue, and it might be that AI is the answer. But actually, in a lot of cases, there are a lot of easier non-technical wins you can have before you even get there. So, yeah.
And I think, Giles, I think that's really important, because I feel one of the things that perhaps AI has done, and perhaps the AI hype is kind of helping fuel this, is that it's really enabled, because it's lowered costs. It's really enabled anyone to build the wrong thing much faster, much cheaper.
That's a great way of putting it. I'm making a thesis of that and giving everyone thesis. Yes.
And so therefore, understanding what problem you're trying to solve, and therefore what you're trying to achieve, becomes more important, because it's easier to just waste time doing the wrong thing. It's so much easier and cheaper, right? And of course, you go on and search the internet or the web for AI tools, and you're just inundated, and you're like, where do I go? Right. And so then you get lost in that, don't you? You just don't know where to go. And so I think you have to go back to those fundamentals, and those fundamentals for me just have become, they were always important, but now they're really, really important, because it's so much easier to do the wrong thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then you end up in a world of mess. So you've burnt cost. You're in a world of mess. And actually, you get a lot of disillusionment. A lot of people think of AI as being, it's the silver bullet, apply AI to it. Again, the amount of, so we say, senior executives I've heard who just go, we need to be doing AI. I mean, that's the classic. And it's like, okay, what do you mean by that? And they're going, I don't know, we just need to be doing AI. And it's like, yeah, but why? What does it mean? Do you just want us to put AI on the website because everybody else says AI? But actually, we need to kind of think about, well, why do we want to be doing AI? Where do we want to do it? And is it the right thing to be doing? And
I think that's right. And this applies. And this is one of the interesting, I think, dynamics of where AI can really level the playing field, with SMEs competing with larger organizations. And I think, because where it can have a real impact is on like the research and development cycle, because it can shrink that cycle. And if you think that, traditionally, it's only really been large enterprise that have had kind of, or very small technology-based startups that have had R&D capabilities, right? Because, you've needed a research team, a product team, an engineering team, and because information was always kind of the challenge traditionally. Now information is abundant, right? And with AI, you can do research much faster. You can design and run experiments much faster. You can certainly build prototypes much faster.
Yes.
Right. And so does that enable SMEs to kind of do more exploratory work? And again, they have to be careful where they spend their time and resources and money here. But does it give them the ability, because you can do it with one or two people, right? And because research anyway is becoming more multidiscipline, you can do, maybe augment. And so I think actually because of this, SMEs actually can do a lot more R&D than perhaps they realize, and use it in that capacity to then understand where they can develop new products and services to grow their business, rather than how do I take my current business and augment it with AI? Well, actually, maybe it's about finding new businesses based on your core capabilities, using it as an R&D function.
Yeah, and I can't remember.
That's incredibly insightful. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't remember who said it at the AI summit the week before last, but there was somebody saying about that, about rather than digitally transforming your current business or AI transforming it, you need to think about what an AI-enabled business would actually look like. And that's actually probably, as you say, where the SMEs, it's easier because there's fewer people. It's easier to morph. People are used to wearing lots of different hats, whereas your big, your huge businesses, I always describe, they're like the super tankers of the business world. It takes them a lot of time to change direction, and they will do. But as the smaller businesses, you can react and move to that. And actually, but trying to do that within an existing organization is a real challenge, no matter how big you are. But obviously, the bigger you are, the harder it is as well.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think because most large organizations try and protect themselves from the innovation because they're worried that the innovation is going to disrupt their existing business.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And SMEs don't have to do that, and I think to your point, the interesting thing here is that because SMEs are small, one of the advantages they have is their people are much more interconnected and probably carry a lot more knowledge, so they can join dots much faster and much more effectively and seize opportunities,
Yeah, they're able to morph as well.
Yeah.
A bit like the AIs, they're more general and they're able to actually do those things rather than just being stuck in their pigeonhole. So.
Yeah.
I quite stupidly didn't check the time when we started, but I got a funny feeling we've been going for.
We've been going for about half an hour now. But
there we go.
It's brilliant. It's absolutely. There's no way we would stop this conversation. No. This conversation will continue. However,
we do always promise people we'll keep the episodes to half an hour. So I think we probably ought to try and wrap up this one. But I think there's so much more we could discuss on this, and it'd probably be great to get you back, Mark, and continue the conversation.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
There's so much more we can dig into here.
And I think as we try to say to people as well, people are listening, if there are particular areas that we've discussed today that you would like us to kind of deep dive more into, then by all means get in touch, let us know, and we can come back and have further conversations around that. But before we let you go, Mark, there's one question. You are our third guest, so we can't say we're experts, but we've always asked our guests at the end exactly the same question. So we'll pose it to you: is if in terms of you personally, what's your current go-to AI tool? What's the one that you find yourself using on a day-to-day or multiple times a week basis? Or service that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I think first of all, everyone needs to have a Claude account. They just have to go get a Claude account. Like if you haven't done that, go do it. And then just explore Claude, right?
Yeah. Other services are available, but we all like Claude, but we all prefer Claude. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Go. And so I would say that has to be your starting point. And then understand the tools and capabilities that are available through Claude, because it's vast. Like, for example, and again, I'm not trying to diss any single organizations, but I used to have a Canva account. Don't need a Canva account anymore. because Claude has the capability to do all of that, and so through one subscription, you then realize, actually, I don't need these other things because I can get it through Claude. So I would say right now that, I try and I explore Claude first. And then if I can't do it in Claude, I'm looking elsewhere.
Then go elsewhere.
That's a very, very good point. And probably very close to what Giles and I are doing quite a bit.
Yeah.
Although our profile over here has 3 senior technologies, probably testifies to, what is more appropriate for us.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much, Mark. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes,
and one of the things that I think would be really good to explore, because one of the things that is really easy to do in Claude, like you can do this in 2 days, is set up an MCP server, right? So you can get Claude to pull on your own data. And and then you can start to build tools around that. And it's just incredible. It's just incredible. The power of such things. So again, there's loads of things to explore more.
Yeah, actually, sorry, little tangent. Did either of you get a chance to play with the new version of the model before I got pulled?
Very, very briefly, I got the email where it says like, "Oh, you should, if you use Fable, use it like that." And I tried it, but I mean, I didn't have enough of a chance. I only think I had an hour or so to go in there.
I was talking with somebody I won't mention the company name, but they're a software company, and they got access to it, and they went absolutely crazy on it for the 24 hours or 36 hours beforehand, and then it got taken away, and their feedback was it was incredible. And now they're like, it's horrible because the really shiny toy's been taken away and we can't have access to it. So, so now it's just like, I've had to take the little message off mine that says it's not available. Like, all right, keep rubbing it in. So, yeah.
Exactly. Well, no, they know what they're doing. They're rubbing it in for a reason. They're reminding you that it's coming back. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, let's not get all political about Donald Trump and stuff like that. Let's just keep it like that. But yeah, thanks ever so much again, Mark. That was brilliant. Really great to have you here. And I think we definitely need to get you back on and continue the conversation.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Cheers, Mark. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, there you go, Theo. That was an interesting discussion.
That was excellent. That was everything that I was hoping to be in terms of kind of going deep a little bit onto everything that's going on now and the implication for SMEs. Mark is great. Yeah, there's so much more we can go into. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I think we're definitely going to be having him. I think he could be our first repeat guest at this rate. So I think there's so much more on that. But let's. What was your kind of takeaway? I think what was your takeaway from the discussion?
You know what? As we were kind of approaching the end of the conversation, I was reminded of an ad that I saw on YouTube the other day. It was one of the vibe coding tools.
Yeah.
And they had this kind of snapshots of everybody coding up a little app in the office. And I'm making, I made a little reporting app and I made a little dog dating app or whatever it was. And there was like every employee had an app. And they were trying to make it sound like, isn't this great? And I was thinking, that's horrible. And to the point, Mark's point, when he kind of said that everybody's solving their wrong problem really, really quickly.
Yes.
That's what it made me think. The fact that you can, you give these tools to everybody in the organization, all of a sudden they come up, not just the wrong problem, but they come up with pedestrian problems to pedestrian solutions. Not to be a little bit maybe caustic about it, but more to the point that we heard today, spend less time on what you currently are doing and more time on R&D. Yeah. The idea that SMEs can take the time, can take the technology, the enabling technology, even the more complex stuff, and use it to do more R&D rather than just do more reporting and the rest of it. Yeah, I think that's just gold dust. I'm going to take that.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah, they were great points. I think the other one he was saying about obviously using it, particularly for SMEs, using AI to wrap around their existing data sources and provide them that level of kind of intelligence, more rapidly being able to pull together and infer things from the vast data source they've got, be the Excel spreadsheets. I think that was great as well. And I think the other thing was his analogy, which I have heard him say before, but I'd completely forgotten, that what about going into a football stadium is a bit like talking to an LLM. Just entirely sums it up. Just stand in front of the ground. What do you all think? And it's like, well, we all think this. It's like, okay, on the ground of probabilities, I thought that was a really good analogy.
That sounds really good. You know what it made me think? As a visualization, as a way to visualize things, I think it's a Wheel of Fortune. I think it's some kind of like TV game where you get to ask the audience
Yeah.
And if you don't know, you ask the audience. That's what it made me think. So it's
Yes.
and
Yeah,
LLM
yeah.
is just asking the audience.
Yeah, it's like, we do. Yeah, we asked 100 people, and this is what they said. Yeah, exactly. It's that sort of
Is
thing,
that the
isn't it?
truth, or is it just groupthink? There you go.
Yeah. Well,
Fantastic.
that was a great conversation, you said, and thanks once again to Mark for joining us. Really enjoyed it, and we'll definitely have you to get you back on. I mentioned it during our time with Mark, but just to say to everybody again, if there are any particular points of the discussion that resonated with those that are listening, that you'd like us to go back deeper into, drop us a line, get in touch. All the contact details are in the show notes as usual, and I'm sure we'll be getting it back on for a discussion anyway. But actually, if there's specific areas, let us know. But yeah. Other than that, to say thank you to Mark, thank you, Theo, for joining us again. We are
Giles.
beside ourselves that
We are.
you have been with us, and we look forward to seeing you all again, or you hearing us again on a future episode very soon. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Beside Ourselves. Don't forget to send us your questions via the comments or the email address in the description. For further information or to discuss an upcoming project, please visit besidepartners.com.